Hey guys, welcome to the Gun Shop with me, Johnny. Today we're going to be having a look at this, a Krieghoff K80 Parcours. Starting at the back of this, we have a hand-fitted kit ease pad, although obviously there is 1,000 variants you can get. Moving on to the wood, this wood is a lovely grade 3, grade 4, very nice, very classic. Scouse walnut, Turkish walnut, nice once again. Laser checkered, and you have this sort of dual palm swell. If you can see from the top there, you have this real tapered neck, and that actually lends itself to be grasped while still filling the hand. It's the perfect little setup. For a company whose motto is you shoot with the barrels and hit with the stock, obviously custom stocks are one of their biggest things, and this is obviously because if you're buying a gun of this caliber, gun fit is really important. Essentially what I'm saying is this gun is quite a lot of money. This gun retails for £17,000. This is a K80 Parcours Vienna Scroll, which is in itself just quite beautiful. Anyway, let's move off of the stock because every stock on a K80 is very different. This one is set up for game, it's got quite a lot of cast, and it is a very pretty piece of wood for what it's worth. But it is laser checkered. But hey, that's just me being picky. Round the head you have these large flat faces and these small cutouts. This is because you have the standard Krieghoff sliding locking plate that goes over the top of the barrels there. Instead of having a bottom bite or lumps or anything like that, they've opted for the age-old tradition of a sliding lump that goes off over the top of the gun. This locking plate makes for a very shallow action bed, and it's actually the action is where you get some really cool technology. So we're going to pop the stock off and have a little look at what's inside. So now we're inside the action. It's worth mentioning that the steel quality used in a Parcours, a K80, is unbelievably good. It's very hard, it's well finished, and actually material quality is superior to many other competitors. However, this is so hard that it requires diamond cutting techniques and is, well, it's not going to wear out particularly quick. So you are buying a gun here that is legendarily guaranteed or boastfully guaranteed to last 1,000,000 rounds. Whether anyone's going to use one for that long, who knows, but if one is going to last that long, it's more than likely going to be this Krieghoff. The steels they use are superior to others. Anyway, let's look at the actual action. Firstly, you have the safety on top. This can be manual, but in this case, so it can be automatic, but in this case is manual. You have this lovely little button you've got to push on top to make it go forward, so it's not going to come on and off by accident. It's a very purposeful thing. Very nice, very slick, feels delicious when you do it. Extremely well engineered. The selector, instead of being on the top, is on the bottom, and there's a little rocking cradle. As you can see, as you rock that arm, what you're doing is you're selecting which sear that ball is going to engage with. A very nicely machined thing once again. There's nothing about a Krieghoff that you can say is under-engineered. As you can see, that button on the safety actually, instead of operating on anything spring-wise, has a little locking bar cut into the action. So as you push that down, it locks up into the next stage. Just a lovely little thing. When one does pull the trigger, lets it go, it is a mechanical trigger. It's actually a very clever system. And then once it's reset for the second, you pull it up and you have these very short sears connecting the trigger to this. And instead of being top loading or bottom loading, they are essentially the shortest sear you can get on the action design they've got. And where all the faces are ceramic polished, the triggers are crisp as you like. Again, they use this whole design action for over and under double rifles, so it needs to have a good trigger. More important, it needs to be reliable and solid, and these really are delicious. Unlike other mechanical triggers, these guys actually have these sort of floating shrouds around the outside and have a small inertia block in there, so actually it cannot double discharge. Well, should not double discharge anyway. As you can see, every pin, everything, every little retaining circlip is lovingly put in. It's really well made, and everything that needs to be polished and clean is polished and clean. You know, there's a few machining marks on these little shrouds here, but they don't really make a difference, and even they are smoother to the touch than most of the gun components out there in the market today. I just can't get over how delightfully well made that safety is. Before I pop it back together, it's worth mentioning that even the way that the ejector rods are machined and designed is just exceptional. They really are a feat of engineering, and there's something quite delicious about that in itself. Moreover, this whole top locking shroud, you have this little bar here. If you push that in, you can actually see this shroud operating back and forth. And all it is a shroud that covers the whole barrels. You've got a slight chamfer that can progressively move over the barrels as they wear in. As you can see, you've got this little cut here that rides over that cut on the back of the barrels. A very smart and a very simple system used by a lot of cheaper guns over the years, but actually when executed properly, it is a slightly different kettle of fish. I'm sure you'll agree. Once we have got this action off, it's a good time to have a little look at what Vienna Scroll is. This is Vienna Scroll. Acanthus scroll work across the whole gun. Very nice, not one surface left untainted, and yet still not overly garish. The engraving is actually on the action block itself, which is machined from a single billet of monochrome steel, and there are 65 plus engraving patterns available from the factory, unless you fancy something custom, because they'll do that for you as well. Obviously the price goes up and down regarding how much handwork and how many hours it takes to produce on the outside of the gun. However, I've never thought one buys a Krieghoff for a beautifully engraved gun. I think there's some better engraved guns out there, some beautiful guns out there. However, engineering wise, these guys are pretty much at the top of their game. And if you look at that, it's just, if you guys could feel this, you'd understand how nicely these two things are joined together. And most guns are nicely made, don't get me wrong, but everything about this gun is exceptionally made. And let's put the stock back on and move off the action. Again, although many variants are available, this gun weighs 8 pounds and it's kind of their lightweight game spec version of the Parcours. Most of that weight sits inside this very sturdy action block, and surprisingly the forend iron as well. This forend, for something that is quite slim, and forends usually don't weigh a huge amount, has a large lump of steel at the back here. As you can see, you have these beautifully engraved, and it is stunningly inlet woodwork. And you still have a rather funny, and I've always found this amusing, that the wood to metal fit on forends is never that great, or at least there's never seemingly a chamfer. And I understand why they do it, and a lot of it is aesthetics. If you look, you have that double lip, and that's quite nice. But I would have liked to have seen this sort of blended in, because the wood to metal fit around the action is obviously exceptional. Mostly because it has to be, because of the way that this shroud comes back, but that's by the by. There's a lot of weight in this forend, and this lends itself to a gun that actually has all of the weight planted around this middle section. So although it is an 8 pound gun, it moves like absolute lightning. The barrels are monoblock, and as you can see, there you actually have these little flats that run along the outside after the end. There's a little bit of a unique feature on these guns. There's not many guns that keep that machining around the back of the chamber there, because they're quite a short monoblock, interestingly. Or whether that is interesting, I'm not entirely sure. They have extra long forcing cones for reduced recoil, but more or less that just creates a smoother barrel profile. And they generally come as fixed choke, but they do come fitted with Briley's and Teagues. This one is fitted with a set of Teagues. Again, rib options are fairly endless. This has a mild taper 6 to 5mm rib with a double bead sight, where it is just 2 tubes, and you have the ability for that outside shroud to go over the top. Well, it does create a very lightweight set of barrels if you want. I've used quite a few Krieghoffs over the years, and actually there's some ones that are really nice and some that are really nasty. And again, like with any manufacturer who uses one name but builds custom guns around it, that makes for a gun that can be used by one person once and somebody goes it's horrible, and requires somebody who's buying one to understand that they're not just going to go and buy the cheapest one that's going to be the best. They do need to shop around, have a feel of some, until you find one that you can fall in love with. For example, this gun that weighs 8 pounds feels in the shoulder a gun that weighs about 7.4. It feels and handles like nothing, but where it's a bit heavier, it's still quite static. I've used some of their trap guns, and they honestly, to me, some of their trap guns with the actual trap barrels on feel like a couple of drain pipes. However, I've had trap stocked sporters that handle like gods, for trap shooting at least. I've played with various game guns, I've played with various sporters, and I have honestly found not one that was the same. I found a couple that I felt absolutely in love with, and more importantly, I've found with Krieghoffs, more so than any other gun, that they surprise you out in the shooting field by being totally different to how you'd expect them to be when you actually took them out of the box in the shop and gave them a handle and yeah, that's going to shoot like this. They seem to surprise you somewhat, sometimes positively, sometimes negatively. Essentially what I'm saying is, unlike a Browning 525 Sport or 130 inch, and you can pick them up and they're all kind of similar, these have no similarities one to the next. Although you might be able to find two that are similar, you're going to struggle to find one that's the same. And that's because when somebody buys one of these, they can make it what they want. And when someone orders one of these for stock in a shop, they can make it what they want. And that can be a huge positive or a huge negative. But if you don't like Krieghoff, don't write them off, just try another. There will be one out there that is for you. My final note on Krieghoff is, with the Browning and Beretta, where you have a very similar travel distance between the grip, the trigger, and the hinge pin, balancing over the hinge pin is kind of a fairly standard thing. Where the Krieghoff has such a long action and they are a very different gun, generally you will want to take your balance point from about 1/2 to 3/4 behind the hinge pin if you're looking for a more normal balancing gun, or to find out your true balance. Again, true balance should be from the trigger distance going forward. However, we all, because we're all sort of a bit lackadaisical and we can take it for granted, balance over hinge pins, but you can't do that with a Krieghoff. However, again, you'll find Krieghoffs that balance back, balance forward, balance all over the place. It's a very personal thing. I think you'll agree that regardless of what you think of Krieghoff, what you think this should cost or whatever, it is a lovingly made machine. It is a beautifully made machine. There's a lot about it engineering wise that anybody can admire. When it comes to gun making, well, they are a sort of a Marmite gun. You either like them or you don't. But like I said, don't write one off until you've shot enough of them to find one that you go, oh my god, that is really good. However, if you're not going to order one new, it's kind of a hard task to find one that you can fall in love with, potentially. Guys, thank you very much for watching. Take care, goodbye, and we'll see you next time.